So for this Facebook Live, we're on the banks of Loch Lomond at a place called Salachy on the east side of Loch Lomond. And the reason we're here is to talk about wild camping and the fact that the Park Authority is changing the regulations, which will actually make it much more difficult to do wild camping. It's a very popular activity around here. You can see that there is a campsite. People very often camp down on the beach here. They have changed the regulations here, but in a lot of the park it has been unregulated. People have just camped really where they want to. So now the National Park is clamping down, and what they're saying is that you will have to get a permit in certain designated busy areas, and that tends to be on loch sides and along the sides of roads. The busiest areas where people just tend to turn up and pitch their tents, you will need to get a permit, and that will cost you £3 per night. You will have to get it in advance. If you don't, then there is the possibility that you could be prosecuted, that you would be reported to the public prosecutor in Scotland, and you could then face a maximum fine of £500. Not sure what happens if you don't pay the fine. It could be that if you don't pay the fine, there could be even more serious penalties as well. So wild camping enthusiasts are essentially saying that that is quite a serious infringement of the right to roam, which is enshrined in Scots law, and I think we can expect that there might be one or two protests. Certainly wild campers are very angry about it, and they believe that this is something really that should not be happening. We've got a message here from Liam saying wild camping was my childhood. Well, I don't know if you camped around Loch Lomond, Liam, as I did when my kids were young, around Loch Achray, but it is fantastic for that kind of thing. It is one of the best locations, I would say, in the UK. I mean, let's just have a look at the environment where we are. You can see this is ancient Atlantic oak wood. These trees, some of them will be new growth, some of them very, very old. But the unfortunate thing that happens with the wild camping, what you can probably also see, I'm going to get Andy, the cameraman, just to look at some of the stumps down on the foreshore there. What happens is that people chop up the wood and use it for firewood. Got a message here from Sebastian. Good idea, we don't have to ruin every part of nature left. And that, Sebastian, you're right, is part of the argument. It's one of those really finely balanced things, I think, where on the one hand, some people say we must protect the environment, but on the other hand, people say, what's the point of protecting it if we can't get access to do the things that we want to do, like camping? Another message here from Sue saying, good idea. It's muddy and eroded enough as it is. And then Jeff continues, well, if you want to preserve the camping areas, you need to do this. Otherwise, you get overcrowding and trampling of areas. And that is very true. They tell us that this location, Salachy, you would find people who just left tents, sleeping bags, all their camping gear. They would camp for the weekend and then just leave it. Hundreds of pounds worth of kit left. Sometimes burnt out cars. At one time a plasma screen was found. People apparently had been using that for Xbox games. And some people apparently set up a bar at one of these campsites so that they could obviously have a good night of drinking. A message here from Tiffany. Good idea, but where do you get the permits? Well, for that, Tiffany, I think you need to go to the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park website, and if you search for the detail on camping, there's a sidebar. It's very obvious. You click on it, it says this is where you get your permit, and then you will find out what the availability is. Neil says a fine for camping in a public area, another reason why this country is turning into a joke. Well, I should point out, I think, Neil, that the law is different in Scotland compared to England. You may know that already, but it is supposed to be the case, according to the Land Reform Act of a few years ago, that there is a right to roam, that you are essentially allowed to go wherever you want. There's no such thing as trespass in Scotland, and so the wild camping enthusiasts say, well, this runs completely counter to that. I've got a message from Rohit. It's good to control wild camping by implementing permits. It's not banned, it's just getting controlled right. And I think that is the question as to whether they are going to get the balance right, whether they will enforce it very strictly, or whether that threat of prosecution will remain really just that, just a threat, and it won't be the case that people are getting these massive fines. Nicholas says, Are there still free areas for camping? That's a good question, and I probably should have clarified that earlier, because it's the case, Nicholas, that what happens is it's only for the really busy areas where you need to get a permit for wild camping. So that's around Loch Lomond, the other lochs like Loch Achri, which is up to the north in the Trossachs. You will find, if you go to the Loch Lomond website, that you will get all these details. But for the other places which are not so busy, so, you know, halfway up a mountain or in a secluded valley, you can still wild camp there, but it tends to be the case that those are the ones that are not so greatly used. Elspeth says perhaps if the money goes towards education for environmentally sensitive camping, it will be a good thing. Well, I don't think it's the case that it will, to be honest, Elspeth. I think when people get fined, that just goes into the public coffers. It's not going to go back into helping the situation for camping. Mike says, something just popped out of the water behind you. Was it Nessie? Let's have a look at that, Andy. Can we see anything in the water? There were some guys fishing over to the left of us. I think I can just about see a boat somewhere. No, nothing in the water. Mike, I'm sorry about that. We are on Loch Lomond, so we're not on Loch Ness, so we can't give you any satisfaction there. Greg asks, who's going to police this? Mostly it is going to be the park rangers, so those are people employed by the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, but they will also use the police as well. I think they're pretty much doubling the number of rangers for the park, so they'll have about 60 for the high season, which is when these restrictions apply. So it's from now, the 1st of March, until September. In the off-season, my understanding is these restrictions will not apply. Huddy says, what public space will be left? The answer to that is that actually most of the national park will still be free for wild camping. I mean, it is a huge area. We're talking about 720 square miles, and he's just giving you a little bit of a view of that. You might even, I don't know if the camera can see it, Andy, but that snow-capped bit there, I think, is a little corner of Ben Lomond, which is the highest peak around here. You might just be getting a view of that through the trees. But as I was saying, it's a huge area, 720 square miles. It is only 4% of it that is going to be restricted. So there are still, you know, massive areas of this national park where you can wild camp. It will not cost you anything, but those are the difficult areas to find. The easy ones alongside the roads, alongside the lochs, that is where you will have to get a permit from now on if you want to do wild camping. And I should stress again, you will get a lot more information about this from the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park website. It's very easy to find if you just Google it, and if you navigate your way through, it will explain to you how to get a permit and what areas are available for you. Preston says, is there an amount of irreversible ecological deterioration due to these events, or can there be a full recovery? That's a good question. I'm probably, to be honest, not qualified to answer that because I'm not an ecologist. And it is true that for years and years there's been huge public usage of Loch Lomond. I mean, it is one of the most popular camping areas in Scotland. About 4.5 million visitors, that's not campers, 4.5 million visitors every year. I would say it's probably the case that some of the damage is irreversible, but the Park Authority really has a number of jobs. One of them is to allow public access, which is what all this is about. And one of the other really important ones is preserving it. So that is what they're trying to do. Let's take a look over here. Andy's just pointing out that we should take a look across the loch. You can see there the west side of Loch Lomond, and you can see the hills of Argyll. You can probably see a bit of snow on that ridge off in the distance. But a little closer to us you can see the stump of a tree, if Andy just moves across to that. And what that stump actually tells us is that is some of the damage that has been done. So we're looking at these old oak trees. Some of them will be hundreds of years old. That particular one has been chopped down for firewood, and there are other stumps that you can see along the foreshore where the same thing has happened. Preston, oh yeah, we've done your question, Preston. We've got a question from Mirwais who says, I think they should ban the dangerous areas and put security for the rest of the park. Well, they're not going to do that. They are only going to police the busiest areas, I think. Mike says, is it cynical to assume this is a money spinner, fee-paying spots and fines for straying out of them? I think that in terms of the permits, the park will raise money. That is definitely true. And I suppose one of the things that wild campers might say is that they are not perceived as money earners by the businesses in this area because they just come with tents, they're self-sustaining, and they don't really spend very much money in local businesses. So it may be the case that local entrepreneurs would rather see people with camper vans, with caravans, staying in hotels, eating in restaurants. So that may be a valid point. We'll have to see how this goes. So just wrapping up this Facebook Live, which has been all about the balance between preserving the environment and allowing people access, allowing people to wild camp, this new system of permits that is going to come into force, in fact comes into force today at the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. It is going to be a very busy summer, and it might be a difficult summer because people are going to arrive here expecting to be able to wild camp. And I suppose the message really that people have to take home is that you need to check whether you can camp in a particular area unless you're really off the beaten track. If you're in one of those areas which is very popular, which you may have used in the past, just be aware that you need to check before you come. And at that point we're going to wrap up this Facebook Live. Thanks very much indeed for listening and contributing.